Okay, welcome to episode 10 of Talking Prisoner. We've got a very special guest on today who worked behind the scenes of Prisoner. He's a man that worked both in the studio and on location. He was also a man who later had a successful career as a news cameraman at Channel 10, witnessed and filmed many fascinating and terrifying stories in and around Melbourne. As Prisoner fans, you will have seen his name many times on the end of the credits. Welcome to Talking Prisoner, Mr. Barrie Pullen, and welcome, Ken.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
Good to have you, Barrie. Now let's start off with your filling us in on your youth before you got a job at ATVO, as it was early on.
Oh, well, it was, I grew up in Surrey Hills and I was connected with a amateur drama group at the local church, St Theodore's Wattle Park, and well, I was enthusiastic to be a part of that group, and I got taught a lot of backstage type things like lighting and audio, and it was we used to put on annual plays, and they were quite good plays. They were a lot of Noel Coward plays. We did Private Lives and Bell, Book and Candle, and we did some Frederick Lonsdale 3-act plays like Canary Sometimes Sing, and we'd put these on annually. And I got an appreciation of working backstage in the technical area, which I was doing in my early teens actually, and went right through for several years. And I really enjoyed that side of it. And I'd teed up with a gentleman who was connected with the drama group, who was an electrician, and he taught me a heck of a lot of stuff, and I sort of decided I wanted to be an electrician, I think because of him. And anyway, when it came time for me to leave school and get an apprenticeship, he organised with a local electrician to put me on, and his third-year apprentice was leaving, and he was going to give me the opportunity to come into the first year. Anyway, that job that he was going to fell through, and the electrician said to me at the time, look, I can't put you on because he's not going, but I can guarantee you next year when he's finished his apprenticeship, I will take you on if you want to go back to school for 12 months. And that didn't appeal to me all that much. And through the drama group, we had directors who'd done a lot of reviews at the universities, and they were a much more senior group of actors. They were, in their 20s into their 30s, and one of them had been connected with Crawford Productions doing some scripts for shows like Division 4 and Homicide, and this person said to me once, at Crawford's they've got this trainee program, and where they train you up, in different areas, and that really appealed to me, the thought of it. And I cold called Crawford Productions one day, and they said, come on in, and I had an interview with them, and they gave me the job, and a job which I thoroughly enjoyed. I was the bottom of the ladder. You did everything. Like, I can tell you, you did everything. But it got me into the industry, and it was a department of 5. And I look back at those people that sort of came after me, or a couple that were before me in the trainee room. One of them was Tony Oshiger, that ended up going, becoming an audio editor, and then on to a DA, and eventually directing. And Grant Fenn, the late Grant Fenn, who was also another director of Prisoner, he was also in the department with me. I had a guy called Ian Merton that starred in a lot of different programs, and he also was an experienced sound recordist that worked at the high end of the industry by the end. And Stephen Millerchamp, who was an actor and was in Mad Max, and but was in a lot of films. He was the other. So all of us, whilst we were all 16 and silly, we did treat it pretty seriously.
So what sort of things did you have to do back then? Like, you just made everything from the bottom. Like, what sort of things did you?
Oh, look, you did everything. Like they had rehearsal rooms where for Division 4, Matlock and Homicide, and you didn't actually have walls or anything, so you had to mark the sets out with tape on the floor. So you'd be crawling along with all this different coloured tape, sort of measuring out the area the set would be. You did everything. You did the mail. If somebody was short in staging, you'd go and do that. If you just did a multitude of tasks, and generally you found that a lot of them would end up in film crew as the runner on the film crew, and from there it sort of expanded. I was pretty lucky at the time that I joined. Within a very short time, well, Crawford's was very buoyant at the time. They just started doing the box. We had Matlock Police, Division 4, Homicide, Showcase, Last of the Australians. There was a lot of shows being made. Plus, they also did documentaries for and corporate videos for major companies like Shell and BP. Though some of those films were nothing short of feature films, almost on 16mm. But I ended up actually working after having done script assisting and a few different things. I ended up having a really, what I believe was a pretty great career, where I was really enjoying what I was doing, and I saw a big area, and then eventually I made it to being boom op on Division 4, and I stayed boom op on Division 4 almost to the end of the tenure with Crawford's.
Can you just tell the fans what a boom operator does, just for the ones that don't?
The boom operator, basically, in the field, you have like a big fishing pole with a microphone on the end of it, and you'd be miking, the faces to when they were speaking. You also might be, that wouldn't happen now with OH&S, but you'd be sort of lying down in the well of the back seat of a Valiant Regal, while they were burning around the streets with police cars, miking the driver and the passenger. We did some incredible things. And I look back now and I think they got a lot of actors to actually drive those police cars, or they were just normal Chryslers back then, at heavy paces, I think they were, but had a siren on the bonnet and a couple of police logos, which are magnetic stickers on the side. But they got the actors to drive these cars, and they had no experience, and I remember Matlock Police, Paul Cronin was the motorcycle copper, and Paul was a lovely guy. Like, I've got nothing but great things, but as a motorbike rider, he was terrible. You'd be waiting for him to fall off every time he hopped on the thing, So there were some funny times, but I stayed with the show, and it was really good. And the electrician actually came back to me after 12 months on the Christmas and said, you're right to go with the electrical apprenticeship. And to my parents' disgust, I turned him down, and I said, I want to stay doing this. I'm really enjoying it. Well, anyway, they came around a bit later, but I think they were a bit disappointed I didn't do the apprenticeship at the time. And anyway, it was all good, and we got to January, and we were shooting late January, and I remember Hector called the crew that were Division 4, which was the show I was working on, back to Abbotsford, their headquarters, and he took us in the boardroom to tell us that Channel 9 had not renewed the show. And he said, I'm trying to get another show up at the moment, and I'm hoping I can get that show up, move the crew onto that show, and it'll all be good. But it all sounded a bit like it might happen, but it may not. And that concerned me a bit at the time. And the show that Hector actually told the crew they were trying to get up was a show called The Simpsons.
The Simpsons.
And that was Simpsons. And I never forgot that, because next to my grandmother's house, there was a family called The Simpsons. And The Simpsons ended up being Sullivan's.
Oh, wow.
And of course, had a very successful few years. But, I couldn't have imagined what it might have been like if it was The Simpsons. Paul Cronin rolling around trying to be Homer or something, but that's what happened. But I was fortunate where I throughout being a script assistant, I'd worked on Matlock, and when they were doing rehearsals, I'd met Graham Wright, who was the floor manager of Matlock at the time, and Graham was pretty good, and I always kept in contact with him. And I managed to get a gig part-time at Channel O, just striking sets on the Friday night and everything for young talent on, because we used to record it. They used to record on the Friday night, and they'd want it, all the sets struck. And I did the odd day here and there. And fortunately, when Crawford's, said that Division 4 was going, I I worked a little bit for Channel 8, not a lot, but I remember the very first day was the 1st of August, which was their 10th anniversary to the day. Anyway, make a long story short, I went for a job at Channel 10, or Channel 8 it was then. Phil Burns did the interview and he said to me, your audio, that was very important to him. And he said, look, I've got jobs in audio, but I have got a job in staging. He said, would you be prepared to do audio if you were required to? And I was happy to do anything, I really was. I was pretty enthusiastic. And the very first day I started there as a full-time employee, I was within an hour of being in staging, and this guy came down and saw my supervisor, Bill Webb, was the supervisor. He said, I need a sound recorder to go at the job. And I've heard that this new guy, can do it. And so he said, yeah, if I need him for the day. And it was Bill Parnell, who was a cameraman who worked for a long time. And we were sent out on a commercial production shoot to get the first colour TV being rolled off the production line at a factory down in Oakley. And it all sort of went from there. And I really enjoyed my time, and I took a lot more interest in the camera side of things, and I was that's where I really could see my future. And I was fortunate enough to have people like Ken Mulholland, who Ken's pretty modest, but I can tell you right now, it was the caliber and the people like him who took the time to actually look at these fresh, wet behind the ear, kids that were coming up, and shared their experiences, which gave us a really good footing for the future. But I've got a lot to thank Ken for. He's the best, without any doubt. He's the best production cameraman I've ever met, ever seen work. He's done some terrific stuff, and Prisoner was more or less Ken's senior show. I saw him do some pretty amazing things on that show. I remember, he was so well regarded by the people, whether they be actors or other cast members, and I don't think he ever realised exactly, how he was being perceived. And we did a shoot, and I've never forgotten it. It was in the rec room, and I can't remember whether the director was Lee Spence or David Stevens. I was trying to remember it, but I remember it was a 3-minute scene, and this scene, they decided they wanted to have it shot on one camera. And the amount of movement and tracking and focus pulling and the expertise that were required to make this scene work, like I would have been totally lost, I can tell you right now. But Ken executed this scene, and it was it had everything in it. It required expertise from so many levels, whether it be focus, framing, tracking. It was just, and I remember it well because Noel Penn, Peter Hind, and myself were all, when it came to the taping of that particular scene, they were all standing around the Conrack monitor, which was just the TV in the studio, watching you execute it. And it was done, was one of the best bits of studio camera work in the drama I've ever seen. And I think that even the senior guys were in awe of how well Ken executed that.
The check is in the mail, Barrie.
No, I'll be very serious. It's like Prisoner was one of those shows that it created a new genre as far as how drama was to be done. Like before, with all these shows like The Box and Matlock Pleasant Division 4, they were certainly technically good for their era, but when Prisoner started, it sort of really pushed the boundaries a bit more. We were all of a sudden in 41, 42 years ago, you were like women were in this sort of role weren't seen to be the softer sex now. They were hard, it had violence, it had a lot of things in Prisoner that we weren't used to seeing in television before, and it really pushed the boundaries. But it also pushed the boundaries technically, where the camera work had to be more precise. It was different. The lighting was sensational. It was on Les Swift, who lit the early scene, early episodes of Prisoner. It just brought a new standard to the industry, and it it was a show that I personally, of all the shows I've ever worked on, it's meant more to me, Prisoner, than any other production.
Wow. Do you remember that scene, Ken, that Barry was just talking about?
If I recall, I think it was Lee Spence that directed it.
Yeah. Well, he was an excellent director. It was really good, but if for a cameraman like myself, you got to remember when I started shooting Prisoner, I was 22. Like I was very young, I was learning to finger paint when, Ken was working on, Sunny Side Up with Channel 7, I really admired the fact, of how hard some of these scenes were to do. Like I always sort of look at camera work that if you're watching the product and not really thinking about the camera work, you're probably doing a darn good job, because it sort of it works, and you're listening to the storyline, you're listening to the actors, and it's all terrific. But Ken had an ability which was exceptional, and as I said, he's always been very modest about it, but he's certainly underestimated what an effect his teaching had to a lot of cameramen, just not me, but a lot of cameramen similar to my age when we started.
Wow, that's love to hear that. How did you get the job on Prisoner?
Well, it was, probably how I got the job was I'd taken a lot of I was in staging. I was doing a little bit of audio here and there, but I'd met Ken, Des Anson, who was the senior cameraman at the station, and I used to come in on days off to shoot like the news and everything. And I remember, I'm plugging in a headset next to Ken's headset. Used to be able to run two headsets out of the camera, and do some. And I just do basic things, but I really had this is where I sort of saw things going, and anything that I was told or taught, I really, tried to absorb, and really try to put it into effect. And in January of 1976, they were putting on a couple of new shows. There was a Vi Greenhalgh show, which was commonly called Vi's Pad, was going to be a new show, and they had a children's show called Billy May that was starting, and it was just going to be on one camera in a small studio, and that I was put on to do those hostings basically, and within a very short time, Vi's show became very, very popular, and they put her in a bigger studio with two cameras, and Billy May's show was sort of dropped after a very short time. So I ended up getting used in a lot of other roles, and I was pretty lucky in that time. I sort of got to do some quiz shows, and I look back at some of the quiz shows we sort of did back then, and there was I think Ken and myself, I think we shot Treasure Hunt. It was 268 episodes. I think we did the whole lot of them, Ken. That on a Monday night when you had to be back in for Prisoner on Tuesday morning. But you sort of look back, and there was a lot of quiz shows that were being done. Then they had talent shows, like Pot of Gold was happening. So that was where you had like 8 acts a show, and it was like a New Faces type show, and I was involved with that. And you'd do 8 different acts in one show, and you'd record over the day that you'd do 5 episodes. And they had other shows that were happening at that same time. Mike Walsh show would come down to Melbourne periodically. Young Talent Time was happening. Almost Anything Goes was happening. Treasure was happening. The Early Bird show, which was a very successful 3 hours of television in the mornings, was happening. You had the races, like the Channel 10 had the race, the horse racing contract. There was just a lot of shows that were being done at that stage, and I was really fortunate to be in at a time where possibly if I wouldn't have been given the opportunity to do a lot of the things I got to do, only purely because the fact the workload at that stage was so heavy, and they moved you into other roles a lot quicker. But I really enjoyed the drama side of it a lot. And when I started shooting drama, I started it on the box. And once again, Ken was pivotal of, keeping me in line and, saying, look, don't do it this way. Like the thing I appreciated most was the fact that Ken was very honest. If it was good, he wouldn't say it was good unless it was good. And if it was bad, he would never persecute you, saying, what the hell are you doing? Like, he would always say, look, you could have done it better by doing this. And he would get his message across, and that really helped me, really helped me. I'll never forget that. And of course, when we moved from the box to prisoner, I was really well down the chain as far as experience levels went. Now, with prisoner, we used to shoot it on, they rehearsed on Mondays, they taped on Tuesdays, which was 7:30 taping till 8:30 at night. Wednesday was rehearsals, Thursday was taping, which was 7 till 7, and Friday was taping, which was 7:30 start to 8:30 finish. That was the time limit, because you were churning out a lot of product. Like, we were making, the station was putting to air 2 hours of drama a week of prisoner. And if you're putting that to air, you've got to be making that at the same time. And that's a lot of television to manufacture, where the bulk of it was studio, and you'd be doing it all over 3 days. But what ended up happening was they tried to always roster a fourth cameraman in there who would be the junior one, which was like me. And they would put him on a shift which allowed the other cameraman to get like a little bit of a break through the day, and you'd share it round. Now, when it came to the credits, of course, there were 3 studio cameraman credits, and that always went to the 3 senior guys. Got no issue with that whatsoever. But a lot of the shows that you worked on, you were never credited for. So whilst the credit appears on quite a few later episodes, and on the odd one where the station was so busy you wouldn't have the luxury of having that fourth cameraman there, so there was a lot of the episodes I got to work on that were never credited to say that I was there, but I was really keen to shoot. And I think that, probably looking back, when I was shooting, I probably spent more time shooting than a lot of the senior guys for quite a few episodes, because I just wanted to keep on going. It was a personal thing. It wasn't because they were, forcing me into doing it. It was something I was wanting to do, and they fortunately let me.
Wow. Well, that was my next question, was about, being on the credits, and IMBD saying you've only done 24 episodes, which I'm sure you did.
Yeah. That's right. That's incorrect. That is totally incorrect. It was heaps more than that. Like, and I'd be looking at the show. I remember, and you'd remember the lines, like a different other things going to say that. And I know the next shot, because it was mine. It would come up at the end, camera credits, and be Ken Mulholland, Peter Hyde, Noel Penn, which was fine. They were the senior people on the crew. But it was only later on, and the odd time where you might end up having somebody who was ill or something, and you're going to replace them, where you would end up getting a credit. It wasn't really we were the junior guys didn't really get a look in so much in that role. But as I said, I'm not dirty on that. That's how it was. And I just personally know I worked on a heap more episodes than that.
Yeah.
Just amongst all those earlier shows you worked on, YTT, Young Talent Time, and Almost Anything Goes. You worked on that as well. Tell us about Almost Anything Goes.
Almost Anything Goes. Well, it was Almost Anything Goes was a show. It's a bit like It's a Knockout that was done several years later. I suppose people might remember that. It was sort of like a Ninja Warrior almost. There was courses, and you had to beat the time trials, and people going through swimming pools and jumping over rostrums and all kinds of things. And the injuries that were in the people got in that show was just quite incredible. there was no health and safety office or anything like that. And I remember the teams were told to always have a couple of spare people because good chance somebody might get injured doing some of this stuff. And I was given the job of going and shooting almost anything goes. And I remember Des Anson's the chief cameraman at the time saying to me, "Don't do anything fancy. I'm putting you on the wide shot, mate. Just take it all nice and easy." Bob Loxton was the director. I remember quite well, and he said, "I'm going to send you up into this scaffolding where there was 2 cameras side by side, a wide camera and a tighter one." And the tighter one was a guy called Jeffrey Spencer, and he said, "You get any trouble, into any trouble, speak to Jeff." And that was good. And he was fantastic. I remember we came the night, we got about halfway through it, and he had a thermos of coffee. And I remember saying, "You want a coffee?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, fair dinkum, I tell you what, there's that much brandy in it, I can't begin to tell you." It was just, so I thought, oh, that's why he's so happy doing the show. But it was, some of the things that happened on that show. It was just the injuries that were sustained, and the people that required medical assistance after it was quite something else.
Had you actually watched Prisoner before you started working on it?
Look, I remember when Prisoner started, and I was like the sets and all that jazz were coming, because the sets, that was something new. Most of the sets that we were using before were a mixture of chipboard and canvas, and this was the first of the sets that were actually built really firm, like proper timber. They were constructed so that when gates got slammed, that the walls wouldn't move or vibrate. It was a really professional set that was sort of there. And I remember looking and thinking, there's only 2 corridors, and in like an L shape. And I think that was one of the magical things of the show, where it made it look so many times that it was just a multitude of these different corridors right throughout the prison. And it was done so well, and the lighting was so good on it. And I was fortunate where, when they started shooting location, a guy called Steve Mann and Joe Battaglia were the cameramen that were actually doing the location. It was originally started with only a couple of days a week. And I worked with them as part of the camera department to do the dollying. We used to have these things called a Western dolly. It's basically a big trolley with 4 wheels, and you'd put the tripod and camera on it, and I'd be the bunny that would pull it. And that's what happened. I remember doing the very first scene of, like, on location of Prisoner. It was held at the Ferntree Gully Pizza Hut, actually, on Burwood Highway. And I remember it was with Mum that was in the series at the time.
Yeah, but, a cool shop.
Yeah, well, it is a pool shop. It's called something Sea Spray Pools. That's what it's called. Yeah, but it's still there today. But yeah, that was the location that was on the very first day that we used, and I remember that pretty well. You know, it was because I'd been out on the box location, and the crew was a lot smaller back then. They actually they pumped a lot more resource into Prisoner to try and make it that next step up with professionalism, in the show. But yeah, that was the first shooting. But yeah, look, I did see the first a few episodes of Prisoner because everybody was talking about it. Like, it was the show. It was a whole new ball game when 10 started shooting Prisoner, and the acting was really professional, and the sets were professional, the lighting was professional, and the camera work was to a new level. And it did have. There was a lot of interest in it right throughout the whole station at the time.
Just going back to the sets quickly, because I know the fans love hearing about the layout of the sets and everything. Is there anything else you can tell us about the sets?
Well, they actually had cladding brick walls. Like, when you felt the actual wall, it was like feeling a brick. It was. I think that during the 70s, there's a lot of old weatherboard places that they covered with this sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, sheeting, you know, of brick to make it look like it was a brick for their house. So that's what they actually had. But we used to have shoot-off walls, like little walls that would be probably a couple of metres long, that we would join onto the corridor to make it look like you're going around the corner to another one, and you'd have like an opening where it'd lead you into the laundry and things like. The laundry scene was the one that was generally, I found, of all the sets to shoot in, was probably the hardest one, because a lot of scenes in the laundry had a lot of cast in them, whether they'd be main cast or extras, and it was generally it wasn't as big a set as what the rec room was. Like, you'd have a lot of people in the rec room, but the actual set itself was a lot wider, and it was hard to. You had the press in one corner, and that basically took up almost a quarter of the set, and it was at that point where I remember I had to shoot Val Lehman in the laundry scene, and quite often you had to be pretty quick with repositioning the camera, and like, you could have 20 people in the laundry, but somehow Val would always manage to know where that camera was, and she'd always know how to get a clean, she'd be able to get a clean shot of that, you know, like, it was, she really had an appreciation of where the cameras were and how to make it work for her as well as for us. And that was terrific. You know, that was really good.
Wow.
Matt?
Yep. That's how it is. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought Ken was about to mention something. So going back to, you said you worked on the outside location scene on the episode of Prisoner. So you've worked on many outside broadcasts as well, like the Melbourne Cup. What were some of the other ones that you've done?
Oh, look, there was, like, at the time we were doing Phillip Island car racing. That was something that was being done. We had the VFA football every Sunday. There was quite like, every week there was an outside broadcast during the footy season, and then you ended up doing things like, I remember I got to work on a Royal Command performance, which was pretty good. I remember it was at the State Theatre in the city. The Queen was going to be there, and it was it was actually going to be on Channel 9, but what happened was Channel 9 had organised Channel 10's van because they needed more cameras, and we were supplying the other cameras, and they had me on St Kilda Road outside the State Theatre on a cherry picker with the studio camera looking at Government House. And the deal with it is I would see the Queen leaving Government House with the flashing lights, and I'd follow her all the way down to the down St Kilda Road into the State Theatre. And Tony Charlton, who was and Anna Ellison, they were the commentators, and they were on a scaffolding in a broadcast box seeing this all happen. And so here I am up there above the tram lines, you know, with the camera, and up comes up all these flashing lights, you know, police on motorcycles and everything. I can see them in the distance of Government House, and I followed them all the way down. And Tony Charlton and Anna Ellison started their spiel about the Queen and where she's been today and where she's going, and it was timed to perfection. So by the time that she got to the State Theatre, it would, you know, they could put the full stop to what they've been saying. And I could hear this through the headset, and following it down, there's a line of probably maybe a dozen police, you know, 2 rows of 6, and then security cars and flashing your lights from the police at the back with a black limousine, you know, and eventually get to the front door of the State Theatre. The door opened, and it wasn't the Queen. It was the junior minister from the federal politics, the water minister or something, you know. And I've sort of looked up and I realised there's another bank of flashing lights just behind, which was her. So yeah, and that was some of the things with outside broadcast. But yeah, look, they did a lot of outside broadcasts. We used to do things like the Logie Awards at different times. We would do Australia Day. On Australia Day, there used to be a concert called the Australia Day Concert. That was a regular that was done every year. There was a variety of different, you know, different productions that were actually done in that time. But you got to work on a lot of outside broadcasts. It was pretty. I quite enjoyed the 8Bs, I'll be honest with you, when they came up, and I enjoyed working on location on prison too. Yeah, it was great.
I ask you what you preferred, the studio work or outside broadcast?
Look, I think studio work is far more like it was more. It's different as far as with the studio work. You can actually you've got the tripod, you've got the pedestal rather, and you've got to move that. You've got to manipulate around different set dressings in the set with the peddy. It's a skill level which is can be really hard to learn, and to do it competently and really well. Certainly, you don't learn that overnight. With location, it was more of the portable camera, and it was mounted on a tripod. And if you did tracking stuff, you'd have a proper dolly, which is the thing the camera sits on, and this dolly would sit on like a railway line, and they'd push it along. So you'd have a grip moving you backwards and forwards. And if you're on a crane, which is a long steel thing that you would sit up the top end, and they'd have weights at the other end, and they'd be tonguing you down left and right. You didn't have as much control. You had control over the camera and how it was being shot, but you relied on a lot of other people to make it happen for you. But I did enjoy the location. It was good. I look back, and I remember one particular night we were involved with Prisoner doing it. And I thought it was an escape. I can't remember who the actors were, but it was during a torrential storm, and they were supposed to be in a drain, and they were trying to get away from the prison. And we decided that it had to look an area like bushy sort of area, and I was involved with the Country Fire Authority, and we said we can get some rain, because they can put some water up in the air and that'll make it look like rain. And and we tried to think of a location which was going to be more bushy, and we thought the edge of the Ferntree Gully National Park, it'll be good because we've got a street that leads straight into it, Bitumen Street. It's got a hydrant at the end of it, and just the other side of this is bush, like it's just the national park. So we decided that this would be pretty good. We'll use this location. Well, it was a night shoot, and it was cold. And when I say cold, it gets pretty cold in Melbourne winter, but this was really cold. And the director really wanted a lot of water, and we were throwing up 1,200 litres of water a minute up in the air, which meant that they were having roughly about a tonne of water land on them every minute. It looked like you're in an absolute hurricane. It was unbelievable. I have never seen so many actors come out of that were just looking like they were hypothermic at the end of it. And I've never forgotten that location that night. That was pretty nifty scene.
Wow.
You when we used to do the races out at Flemington and Caulfield and so forth, you often went back to the channel in the helicopter along with the race caller, who to get back for the news and so forth and so on. Now I always said, not me. I was frightened of falling out of the bloody chopper and out of the sky. How did you cope with all that?
I'll be honest, I never used to enjoy the chopper. I never liked it. I did it because that was part of the gig, and I accepted that was part of the gig. And I'm not nervous Nelly or anything when it comes to flying. It's just not something that I particularly enjoy. And it was well, to give you an example of why I probably didn't enjoy it, was we were doing the Logie Awards. Now, the Logies are sort of like, the big awards for the television actors that were happening annually. And Channel 10 were doing it, and it was being done at the World Trade Center before it became a casino when it was launched. And this is where the location was. And I was set up I was in news by this stage, but I was set up there to actually do a shot in the evening, it was a big logo of the Logie Award that was outside. It was a neon sign. It was large, probably maybe 20 foot, you know, in height. And they wanted a starting shot on that, and I had to pull out to a wide shot. And anyway, this was all good. So we're flying above well before the start of the thing, and they're giving me the countdown, you know, to say, you know, helicopter, you're on, you know. That was my cue to widen it. So everything's going beautifully, you know. It started nice and steady. I was using a stabilizer lens, so it wasn't too shaky, you know. It was pretty solid, and I'm doing a nice slow pull out. We came quite wide. The only thing they didn't tell us was the fact they were letting off fireworks. And they didn't tell me, and they didn't tell the helicopter pilot. And as I'm coming out really wide, I'm seeing these red balls fly at us. And I'm going, what the, you know? And helicopter pilot was down as, I won't begin to say what he said, but I can tell you what. we rose, I think, from 1,000 foot in height to about 1,500 feet in about 2 seconds. I remember it was a bit like being on the Big Dipper, you know, you sort of, you know, it was absolutely frightening. And they were going off everywhere. And if ever you've been looking at fireworks from the top looking down, it's not a good look. I can tell, because you don't know when they're going to go bang, and you don't know whether they're going to hit you. And there was a bit of a post-mortem after that, but that was one area that I didn't enjoy at all. But you know, as far as helicopters, they were a taxi. That was what they were basically. They were just designed to ferry people. It was funny when Ten had the chopper, and it was Reg Anset's old helicopter actually. It was the first Bell Jet Ranger they had. It was very nice inside, but you used to, because the newsroom was very close to the helicopter, when something happened in the other side of Melbourne, like it might have been, you know, Sunshine or one of those areas, you'd be in the chopper and you could be in it within a couple of minutes, and 6 minutes later you'd be in Sunshine, and Channel 9 would be trying to get out of Bendigo Street in Richmond, and Channel 7 would be fighting its way through Dorcas Street, and you were always first on the scene, because we had this thing where they would tee up an oval to land on, and there'd be a taxi waiting for you, and that's how it all sort of worked. But I had one bad experience with coming back from a shoot in Warrnambool once, where we got up there first light in the morning. It was to cover a murder actually down that way, and the weather wasn't particularly nice this day. And when they're coming in the fixed wing, it was a twin-engine Piper in Warrnambool. I noticed that when he put the landing gear down, the pilot, there were 3 lights that came on, indicating a light for each wheel, the front and the two on either side. And this one of these lights didn't light up, and I said, I knocked the pilot on the shoulder and said, "That light's supposed to be on." And he said, yeah, it is, you know. And anyway, he said, I'll lift the landing gear again, dropped it again, the light still didn't come on. And we're there like 7 o'clock in the morning, and he said, "Look, I'll just fly very low over the airstrip." And he said, I'll have a look in the window of the waiting room, because it had like mirrored glass windows, so he could look at it and see whether or not the other wheel was actually down, you know. And it was down to the best of his knowledge, and he hand pumped it down as well. And he said, "I'll do a touch and go to see whether it's all good." Anyway, it did fix the problem, and that was all right. So we landed safely. At the end of the day, we're flying back to Melbourne, and he's had it fixed. And anyway, I'm sitting behind the pilot, and I'm thinking, it's very noisy in here. You know, it was really noisy, and the pilot had the journalist next to, I had a sound guy next to me, and I've looked up, and the door that you entered, which was on the side of the wing, was slightly ajar. And we're in the middle of pretty bad weather, and it was just white around us. And the pilot said, "Oh, blast." He said, "There's 8 locks on those doors, and 2 of them haven't, you know, locked into place." He said, "I really don't want to go back and land to fix it." He said, "It's going to be a little bit cold, a little bit noisy. It'll be right." And I thought, oh, that's fair enough. And we're flying for another 5 minutes, and bang, the door flies open. The door flies open, and we're in a storm. And the journo wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I've got the sound guy having the journalist Rex Hoare in a bear hug. His car keys have dropped 13,000 feet. Dave Sorrell was the sound man, and he was literally stopping wrecks from being sucked out. The planes going sort of all over the place. The pilots put in Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. I knew things were not good at this particular point of time. And he said, I've got to put down. I've got to put down. And he said, I think I'm somewhere over Camperdown. And the voice came on saying, you can't land at Camperdown. It's a dirt strip. It's underwater, you know. And he said, all right, what about Terang? And Terang, once again, was a dirt strip. And this other voice came on saying, don't even look at Terang. You know, you'll crash if you come into Terang. It's like mud. And so we flew this way all the way back to Colac, and we eventually, you know, it had a bitumen runway, and it was, you know, another 20 minutes or so before we made to Colac, and he landed the thing safely. And that was the time that I realised why the Pope kisses the ground when he lands into the country, because I remember taking the camera out as we're landing, thinking, if we're going down, at least they're going to see how it happened. We didn't use that airline anymore.
What an experience. Jeez.
There you go. That's what I think about flying. So I don't like flying particularly. And we've had other things where, you know, I remember we got sent up to the Bright bushfires once, and you have to fly very high because Bright is a lot of mountainous country, and the pilot said, I think we'll just drop down below this cloud, and we should be above Bright now. And he dropped down and dropped down. It was just white, you go through the cloud. But what we didn't know was the fact it was smoke, and it was the same intensity of the ground. And we were very lucky not to crash that day. We were all of a sudden, I could see a mountain that looked like, it was only a blade's length away from the helicopter, and we had to emergency landing that day. And it just, as I said, helicopters are one of those things that I'd fly in because it was part of the job, not because something I enjoyed.
Just before we go on, just going back to the Logies, because there's a lot of fans that appreciate the Logies here in Australia.
Yeah.
What was it like working on the Logies?
Oh, it was good. You had to. When I was doing production, I remember I basically they wouldn't tell you who won until the envelope was just being opened, and you knew who the nominations were, and they'd say the nominated parties, and you were told not to point the camera at the winning person because they'd know, they were the recipients. So you were sort of told you were told just prior to the envelope that, Val Lomas won the award. So you'd point another direction, and as soon as the person was just about to say the winner, you would then swing to that person, and you'd crawl around the floor and between tables and all that sort of thing. And it was you'd be all dolled up in your dinner suit and all that sort of thing. But that was fun to work on. I do recall one particular night where the Logies was held at the Grand Hyatt, and Ted Dunn was the producer of the Thelogies on this particular occasion, and the telecast was supposed to finish at 11:15 in the evening, and I think we were still there at 1:45, and we still hadn't finished the show. So it just went on and on and on. But the Logies were, they, for their time, that was the big award program for the year for television cast.
Yeah, unfortunately, Melbourne lost it to Queensland.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Ken told me your service as a volunteer fireman, and that he experienced what a fireman's lift was at first hand. Can you tell us that story?
Oh, I think I lifted Ken up onto a cherry picker at Flemington Racecourse or something at one stage there with the fireman's lift. It was always it's basically a way that firemen carry people over their shoulder if they need to perhaps move them to the other side of a fence or something like that. Might be barbed wire to lower them down. And we I think I can't remember the actual thing that I'd done with Ken, but I remember picking up a few people with a fireman's lift and moving them to the other side of the fence line at different times. What was it, Ken?
I was a little tired and emotional at this particular end of this particular outside broadcast, and I decided to have a lie down on the top of this scaffolding, mainly to try and dodge de-rigging the camera. And the crew came along and I heard them and I just kept my eyes shut. And somebody said, well, he's obviously having a rest. We'll just dismantle the camera. And the next thing I know, I was picked up and ceremoniously taken down the scaffolding.
I did have a vision of a big Flemington for some reason. You know?
It was.
I don't know what Flemington. You know, it was quite a decent rig. Yeah, they were funny times, that's for sure. But yeah, they were okay. That I'm a life member of the CFA and been in the brigade for 47 years. I'm certainly not going out at 3 o'clock in the morning putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff anymore, but I still have involvement with the brigade.
Fantastic.
Matt, do you want to pick it up? Because we've covered this next question.
Yeah, that's okay. So obviously back to Prisoner, you worked with Steve Mann and Chris Adshed, who both become directors on the show. What was it like working with them?
It was good. I think with Chris and Steve, I'd worked with them on other productions, mainly things like Young Teletype, variety type productions. Steve was a talented all rounder. He was. I think to be fair, both cameramen were very good at doing all kinds of camera work. They were good all rounders, and having worked with them, I sort of knew how they operated, and what you saw was what you got. And I don't think I ever saw sort of fame go to their heads, as they got into more senior roles in the show. They were always really decent men, and they taught me a lot too, and that was I think that with Prisoner it was interesting. We went through a lot of directors for a variety of reasons, but there was because you did work with so many directors, I think that was where I was beginning to get reference of whether you're a really good director, mediocre, or not so good. I don't think prior to Prisoner I could have made that call or made that judgment, but I was beginning to really respect the ones that were the top end directors, and it wasn't so I wasn't respecting everybody, but I just knew that these are the sort of people that would were very, very good at what they're directing. They directed feature films and things of this nature, and I remember saying to one of the directors who'd done quite a few features, how is it for you where what's it like more or less doing, television soapy drama compared with a major feature film? And he said, I treat it exactly the same. He said, if I don't do a good job on this, nobody's going to employ me to do a feature film. So they treated it as seriously as what they were if they were working on the top end of production. I never saw any director with that sort of skill knowledge ever undermine the working on a show like Prisoner.
So being that Prisoner had it did have a lot of writers and storyliners and directors. Did you learn a lot from being under some?
Absolutely. And one of the things I really liked about Prisoner was the fact that it was a family feel. It whether you were the crew or the cast, it really was. It was a joint collective. Like the cast had a respect for the crew, and the crew had a lot of respect for the cast, and it wasn't them and us. It was there was a common goal that everybody wanted to achieve, and that's why I look back at Prisoner. I can't think of any other show that was quite like that. I look at some of the actors, and I look at people like Patsy King, that played the governor. Like, I think she had one of the most complex roles in the show, where like she either had the department down on her throat, so she had to act to try and dodge bullets with government. She had Vera that was after a job. She had to sort of come as a different role with that. she had compassion for the women, so she had the compassionate side where she wanted them to, you know, rehabilitate and get back out, and she got let down so many times. And so she had all these different sort of roles where she had to sort of, you know, dodge bullets, be compassionate, be hard. You know, it was a really hard. I think that particular role, Patsy was very, very good at. You know, I used to think, crikey, you know, you never know what sort of role she's going to have to play today in the show. But lovely lady. You know, I've got and Val. You know, Val Lane. Val was very special to me on the program, and she always, like when I was the junior kid, she didn't treat me badly because I was the junior. Like, she understood that Ken and Peter Hind were much more senior to me, and I may not be quite as, you know, I wasn't as good as those guys. But, you know, if she had to do something again because, you know, my camera work wasn't as good as it could have been, whatever, she always did that without, you know, without tearing limbs off me, you know. And she cut me a bit of slack, and I've never forgotten that, you know, because I was only 22, but I was really keen to work on that show. And you know, like Ken advised me so well, you know, over the years on it, so, which I really appreciate, which was great, you know. Yeah, Val was good. Val had a hard side to her though. She was Val was one of those actors that was totally professional. I can't ever remember Val coming on a set where she didn't know her lines, and she would hit the same position every time on the set where she knew she'd get a clean shot. She was very professional, and she expected the same from her fellow cast and from the crew as well. You know, that was what it was. And she knew her character better than any other character on that show. Like, when she was in that set, you know, like Frankie Doyle, where, you know, actor had to actually get into tune with being Frankie Doyle and come down afterwards. Val, when she was B. Smith, she was B. Smith, and she knew how B would react, how B would do things. And if you had a new director that came along and suggested to Val that B should be doing this, and Val didn't agree with it, they would certainly be told in, you know, no uncertain terms that she wasn't very happy with that scenario. But she was really clever. Like, Val did some stuff that I'll never forget. She had to actually cry in one scene where they wanted a tear coming down, and I think it was after she'd been put in solitary for quite some time, you know, and it was something that had got to her. Anyway, they generally, before the take, they put some Vicine in the actor's eye, and so when it's time to cry, you just blink and it'll roll down. And Val said, "Where do you want me to cry?" And, you know, we had a look at the script, and, you know, just read about here. And she said, "Okay," you know. The makeup girl said the Vicine. She said, no, don't need it, you know. And when it came to the take, she did it, and right on cue, she cried. Like, it was real tears. And I was amazed. I was in awe. I thought, how the heck did you do that? You know, I asked her. I remember, and she said, "I think of death, my own." That's how she did it. But it was just amazing. And she was really, really talented. She was a really great person to work with. For me, anyway, I've got really good memories of the show with Val. You know, she could be a hard taskmaster, but she was, you learned a lot from her. And yeah, it was good. I've got very fond memories of those times.
And it shows how living in character too, that she was a complete professional. But
oh, yeah, she was, and she was a complete, but she expected professionality around her. You know, whether it be from cast or crew. You know, you were there to work and to be professional. You know, and, you know, my head's going up on the screen, not yours, sort of thing. You know, I want it to be good. And she also said, like, there were quite a few scenes where there was involved fighting and everything. And Val used to dislike being slapped where it didn't look genuine. and she'd say to the actors if they had to slap her first, you know, make it a good one. You know, I don't want to be doing 3 takes. I want to do this, and I don't want it to look fake. And she would dislike if somebody came up and gave her a, you know, gentle whack. She wanted a whack. And it was very hard to get some actors to do that. And I remember at one stage that Val actually spoke to them at the script and the writers and said, look, if I have to get a slap, make sure I get the first one. You know, like I want to deliver the first one. And when that happened, Val would give a slap like you, it was no tomorrow. She would actually say to the actor, I'm going to slap you, I'm going to slap you. And believe you me, it'd leave the mark on the side of the face. She would go whack, and it would always look very genuine. She'd only do it on the take, but she'd do it. And she felt that way that possibly the actor, if she had to give her one in return, she'd make it a good one for that one. So there was all that sort of thing that went on at the same time.
Wow. You've got a lot of memories of people who now are no longer with us, like Sheila Florence. Can you tell us a little bit about those memories?
Oh, look, Sheila was lovely. Sheila, I'll never forget like how Sheila's character and Sheila were so different. Like it's rough and tough like she was in prison. She wasn't like that in real life. You know, she was lovely to work with. She was just she was kind. She was a character. She was the character of the crew. But she'd played so many roles prior. Like she'd been in so many feature films and so many other productions that she was an actress that was well acclaimed. You know, she had the ability to either be like Lizzie Birdsworth, or she could have been, you know, Shakespeare, Macbeth. You know, like she was just a lovely person. You know, I look back and I've only got fond memories of Sheila, and I think, you know, when you see what some of the fans do, where they go to St Kilda Cemetery and keep her plot looking the way it does, I think that's absolutely a lovely gesture. I really do, and I've got some great fond memories of Prisoner. Like people were very good to me at that time of my career, and they weren't just work colleagues; they were actually friends, and that was the difference working on other shows. Like I had a stint there where Carson's Law was starting, and Carson's Law was a period show from the 20s, and I've got to admit the sets and everything were magnificent for Carson's Law. They built the set up in a studio upstairs at Nunawading, and it was built like a house, and it was all full of silky gum, woodwork and carving. The sets were magnificent, but the cast was the cast and the crew were the crew, and there wasn't that interaction like there was in Prisoner. And the show, it didn't have that warm feeling. And I came away, you know, quite often thinking, you know, I wish I was working on Prisoner today, you know, because it would have been nicer, you know. It just didn't have that chemistry. And I think that people watching shows, they may not know the chemistry, but there's something about the show like Prisoner that did have a nice chemistry to watch. It was a great show to watch, you know, and you've only got to look at the fans that are from, you know, America and England, and let's face it, it's probably the very first overseas show that was ever produced that ended up going overseas was Prisoner at the time. You know, I can't think of any of the others that were. The box certainly wasn't, you know. But yeah, anyway, I've got some. I liked Prisoner better than I did other dramas. We did a show called Holiday Island that was being filmed at the same time, and I got seconded to do some location work for Holiday Island. And I want you to understand, it was set at a tropical paradise, supposedly in northern Queensland. that sent cameraman Joe Battaglia up to a place called Tangalooma, which is a tropical paradise in Queensland, to shoot stock shots, which means the shots of the beach and palm trees and beautiful blue skies and white sand and crystal clear water. And they would be intercut into the show that we were shooting in Melbourne in the coldest winter since 1937. And it was it was a terrible show to work on in regards to, you spent a lot of the time trying to exclude the sky, because every day all you were seeing was grey, overcast, white sky. And the trick was that you would exclude the sky, which meant that you would shoot everything higher than what you should have, and your eye lines were all over the shot, but you basically, this is what you did. And they had a big swimming pool, and they had a set that they built outside. It's now Lassiter set in Neighbours, I might add. They've changed it around a little bit, but it's where the Lassiter set is. That was the very first Holiday Island set. It had a swimming pool in it. And of course, we had actors that had to be, looking like they were in the beach, in the water, in this tropical paradise, and it was 40 degrees supposedly, and they had to be in bikini with full body makeup, so it looked like they were tan and fresh in July, and they were hopping in this water, and they were all getting sick. They were coming out and getting pneumonia, and they were really, really, it was pretty sad. And they thought, we've got to stop doing this. So how are we going to do it? We'll heat the water. That'll be the answer. We'll heat the pool. So they did that. And they thought, by putting the heating in, it means we're going to leave the actors in there and they won't be getting cold. Only catches, when we arrived to start filming at 8 o'clock in the morning, about a metre above the pool is all of this fog, because it's the heat. And so that didn't work particularly well. And then when actors were delivering their lines, we were seeing steam coming out of their mouth because it was so cold. So the trick was, you got the actors to suck on ice cubes while they were delivering their lines, because that would stop the steam coming out of the mouth. And it was just, it was the most ridiculous things that we were doing on that show. And to shoot it in Melbourne was just absolutely crazy. I remember when we finally did get to summer with one of the series, we used the Boral sand quarries in Cranbourne because it was on a hill and it had a lot of sand. And if you had the camera up high and you did get a blue sky day, it was like an infinity of sand with a blue sky, and it looked terrific. And they did quite a few scenes at this quarry. And the only catch was, with the quarry, all you had was brown snakes, black snakes, and tiger snakes. All I've never seen anything like it. There were snakes every time you went to film, and there was a lighting guy that liked reptiles, and he would just come along and pick them up and flip them away. And you knew they'd be back in half an hour. It was just awful. So I never enjoyed Holiday Iceland.
Wow, what an experience. Did you also work on Neighbours as well? Or?
No, I did not. I finished with production on Prisoner in October of 1984, and I went into news in November of 84. But no, Neighbours hadn't started at that stage.
So when you did go to the news camera department, which wasn't an easy transfer, can you tell us about that?
Oh, look, there was, at all the stations, and I could never work this out, and I really haven't worked it out now, but there was like, it was like the news camera department and production camera departments were like opposing companies. They didn't work together particularly well. The news guys thought the production guys were all, overrated, and the production guys thought the news guys just were, really, had no reason to sort of feel this. There was a lot of animosity between the two areas. And I had actually embraced, when I was in production, the use of these smaller cameras, which were basically had a separate recorder and a camera, and it meant you could actually go out and film in the field. And I honestly, when I was in production, I could see where the future was going with this form of technology. And you look at it now, like, even though the cameras and the recorders are all in one, when you look at shows like The Block, Postcards, Getaway, MasterChef, they're all now filmed by guys that have actually been production cameramen, have ended up doing news type work, and it's just it's not what it was back 40 years ago. You know, it's a different world now, and I had a lot of they just didn't like the idea of anybody from production coming over to news, and I had a lot of trouble with trying to get across, but I was pretty fortunate where after the Olympics in 84 at Los Angeles, we got told they were putting on another news crew. There wasn't a lot of depth in the assistants that they could actually promote from internally, and they were putting on another crew, and it was going to be with this electronic gear, because most of the news crews at that stage were still 16mm film. And I managed to get a berth as that new news crew, and I know that the chief cameraman at the time was not overly happy about, you know, having me in there, and I couldn't work out why, because he'd actually had a production background at Channel 7 and done TV Ringside and bits and pieces. So anyway, he was basically said, right, you want this job, you know, you're going to be employed as a B grade. And that was a drop in salary, actually, from what I was getting in production. And I wanted the job, and I said, yeah, and they reviewed that, you know, in a very short, or like by March the following year, which 5 months later, they reviewed it and they lifted me. But it was very clear that, you know, you're not going to have an easy run here, kid, you know, like it's that's how it was. And in the first day they put me on news, it was a Wednesday, I remember, and there was nobody that was particularly happy to see me, I don't think, but they sent me off to a protest in the city, and surprisingly enough, was at the World Trade Center. And anyway, there was a bit of a protest outside. It was an art exhibition from China, and there was a few people not happy about it being on. And anyway, I knocked off a few shots of that, and I was there for a while, and I could see that there was a few people moving in towards the front. And all the other stations were still around the back. I sort of went around and had a look. Well, as soon as I went around to have a look, it was on for young and old. The police horses were charging at them, and it was, the crowd just went crazy, and the horses were actually falling over, I remember, but nobody else from the other stations were aware that this was going on just on the other side of the building. And I had all these shots, and of course, you know, by the time they'd woken up that I was there, it was all over for them. So the first day I hit the jackpot, you know, where I had all this vision that none of the other stations did. So I was a bit lucky on the first day, and on the Friday night, there'd been a massive police chase out from the city out to Lyndhurst out near Dandenong, and the car had crashed, and he basically carjacked another car and taken it through to Listerfield. And we had scanners, so we used to be able to listen to the police. You can't do it anymore because it's all digitised. But I remember hearing this on the scanner. I think I'm only 10 minutes away. I might go and have a look. So I went down there, and yeah, I got everything, got the arrest, and, you know, it was all the coppers. And next morning I've listened to the radio news, and it's like a lead story, and nobody's got pictures of it. And I've rung the chief of staff, and I said, look, yeah, my name's Barrie Pullen, you know, I've just started in the newsroom. And he said, oh yeah, you know, he sort of heard all about me. And I said, I've, you know, this thing they're talking about, this police chase, so I've got vision of it. And it was just like silence on the end of it. You know, well, you better bring it in and have a look. And anyway, I brought it across, and they whacked it into a machine and looked at it. And the guy was just amazed. I remember him looking back at me. He said, you keep on doing this, you might even make it in here, you know. And went on from there. But I was pretty, you know, I think that I just kept my nose very clean, didn't upset anybody, and just went about the business. But I did have a great time, and I was fortunate enough in 93 to be promoted to the chief cameraman position, and I held that through until the last day of November 2012. So I had, you know, good 19 years of that, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But the one thing I wanted to do was to break down that production news thing, and I honestly believe that I did, and I was really glad, because there were production cameramen that would come and use the gear, you know, for production purposes. That come out the road, and it wasn't a them and us when I left. And we were doing 9 different shows. We were doing Totally Wild, the kids show, Totally Scope. We're doing Sports Tonight at the time, news, of course, the morning show. The Circle had a crew permanently. You had Before the Game. You were making RPM, the motor racing show. We're doing a kids show called Toasted TV for little kids. We're making commercials. Like, we were doing just a variety of production type work. But yeah, look, it was a difficult time, but I was just fortunate that it all panned out all right for me.
So you didn't mind chasing those dangerous stories?
Oh, look, a lot of the stories that you went on, like, you didn't know that they were going to be dangerous when you know, like I was at the Russell Street bombing, and in Russell Street, it's surrounded by Latrobe Street and what's the name of the other street, on the northern side of the police building. But we had an office in there, and Jennifer Hansen, who was the news presenter, well, she wasn't then, she was just a journal on the road. We'd been to St Paul's Cathedral to do a story on Christmas services over Easter, and we just decided to, after that, we'd go and get some lunch, and we went back to our office in the city, where we could send pictures back. And we went and got a sandwich, and I drove around to the street, and we pulled in, and we just walked in the building when it exploded, the car in Russell Street, and it blew all our windows in. You could feel the G-force hit you. It was a noise like I'd never heard before. Don't ever want to hear it again either. It really was. I thought I knew the link truck was outside, outside the office, and I thought somebody had blown that up, especially with all the glass blowing in, but not realising it's just around the corner. So we grabbed the camera and started shooting. There was another cameraman that was with me in the office at the time. He grabbed the camera and with the link truck, and got live pictures out really quickly, and I just kept on filming. And it was that part. I remember going out onto the street, and it was obvious that it was some sort of bomb that had gone off, and I'm standing around shooting everything that's going on. And I'm thinking at the same time, I hope to God they haven't put another bomb in one of these other cars, and this is just to get us all out on the street, and it was going to be a secondary explosion. But like, I ended up having to go to court over that, because they want to use the vision for the court case. One of the things I was amazed was not all the explosive went off. A lot of it didn't. It just got blown across the road, and knowing what devastation that caused, what did go off, I couldn't imagine what it would have been like if the whole lot had gone bang. But you look, with news, I look at it this way. A lot of the stuff you've got no control of with news. Like, that was the one thing I sort of appealed to me about news, was that every day would be different, and you didn't often know what your day was going to entail until you got in of the morning. And whilst some of news is just horrendous, like it is tragic, it is shocking, it is it's just beyond belief what you see at different times in news, in scenes. In the days when I first started in news, videotape was pretty new, and it was a new technology on the road. It wasn't something that was new, and the police didn't have a video squad at that particular time. And if you get sent up to a scene where there may have been a murder or something of that nature, the police would actually get the news crew that was there. They'd say, right, whack a new tape in, and we're going to take you in. You're taking all these shots for us, and then before you leave, you're going to give us that tape, because that would be the tape, and we'd have to sign a stat deck sort of thing, so that we filmed that, if they needed it for court. And I did that on a couple of occasions. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but what I saw was just, I remember I just found that extremely horrific. And I think that you'd be moved not to feel that way. But, that is the bad side of news. There is a great side, like you get to meet so many wonderful people. I had a lot to do with Weary Dunlop prior to him passing away, and he was, one of the biggest heroes, war heroes, and just a fantastic person, like really fantastic. I got to meet like Tony Curtis and Joan Crawford and Priscilla Presley, and I just sort of think there's been quite a few. John Cleese, like people would really enjoy meeting them and see how they are, and it was that side of it's been fantastic. So yeah, news can often be very sad, very traumatic, but it can also be very, your dreams come true by meeting, some very famous people, and it's been for me, I've enjoyed that side.
They're actually they're producing a movie on Russell Street. I think it was.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've heard that. I saw they. I wasn't the news crew because I still do some shooting. I still actually am shooting today, and they, when they were doing some filming, they made a news story out of it, and I noticed that they did actually use the same equipment, the cameras and everything were exactly the same cameras what were being used at the time, but it was awful. Like I was, there were several awards, like won a Logie for the best news coverage of a thing. We got a Penguin Award, which was a television industry award, and there was a Thorn EMI Award, which was the major award for the cameramen and technicians and that work in the industry, and they got Australian Cameraman of the Year award for that, and that, like, whilst I really respect the fact that I think awards are great, I don't think I did anything overly spectacular. I just filmed what was there, and I think that to be given an award for where you've had a loss of life through an act of terrorism, it just never sat all that well with me. But it was, I guess you could say, it is nice to be recognised for some things, but I just don't know whether I particularly wanted to be recognised for that.
Yeah. Getting onto a lighter note, there's a story that you always travel with your fireman's uniform in the back of your car.
Well, I did when I was operational fire, because what used to happen was I would actually, often pass the fire scene on the way to the fire station, and it was sort of there. Funny story about this jacket was I carried it like that for years, and like if you had to pass the fire scene, you wanted to have the right gear to put on so that if you could render assistance, in the interim. So I used to just have it over there, but I remember doing a press conference in the city at the police headquarters, and some copper had seen this jacket over my back seat, and I don't think he was particularly media friendly, this guy, but he had figured that I'd knocked this off, and it was a stolen jacket. So anyway, he apparently contacted the CFA and said, we've just seen in this Channel 10 news car this fire jacket, ever had one go missing and all that jazz. And no, not to our knowledge, and they did the Spanish Inquisition, and eventually they rang the director of news and said, we believe that, one of your cameramen might have knocked off a jacket. And he said, what? He said, no, that's Pullen, he's a fireman. And so all of a sudden it was relayed back through media liaison and everything to this policeman who I never met or never knew, but apparently he was reasonably senior brass. I managed to find out, who didn't particularly like media, that he got told that it was not stolen, and that was the case. And eventually he still went back through the CFA, and it was suggested to me that possibly it wasn't a particularly good thing to be seen having it over your back seat of your car, and if you're going to carry it with you, light down on the back seat or something. So that's what happened there. But look, with the news things, you used to like if I got called to a fire call and I actually had to pass the job to get to the call, and you'd always make sure that you rendered assistance and did whatever had to be done. If it was a situation where it was a fire that the first crews were there, they had it in hand, it was big enough to be of newsworthy sense, then for sure, I would not have my gear on. I'd just go and shoot it as a civilian news crew. But it didn't happen very often. Like I could think that, over, well, gee, I suppose 30 years, it may happen a handful of times. It wasn't a regular occurrence. So I do remember we got called to the Swagman restaurant, and that was a big fire infantry gully, and the pages went off, and we got told there were multiple calls coming in on the smoke issuing. And when we got down there, when I had to pass the restaurant to get to the fire station, and the first truck had already arrived, and I knew that being 4 o'clock in the morning, there's probably nobody in the place anyway. So, I took the camera out, and we used that film for training too, but of course it made it to air, and was an unbelievable fire. I just, the place went from a bit of smoke in the centre to being, fully involved in maybe 5 minutes. I've never seen fire travel quite as fast, in a structure as what it did through the Swagman.
Yeah, that was huge. That
Well, you also had a particular Premier of Victoria tosser,
Yes.
double load of sand or something in your camera.
No, that's very true. Yeah, it was a day we were doing. It was when the tunnel was being built for. I can't remember, Burnley Tunnel or whatever, but there was a press conference that was held with Premier Jeff Kennett, and it was being held just near Gosh's Paddock, near the Collingwood Centre, and they had a lot of these Chinese businessmen that were there that invested a lot of money in the construction, and all the press were there, and still photographers and everything, and there was a pile of sand, and this pile of sand, Jeff Kennett had the spade, which was the spade was all chromed on the end, it was all polished up, and Jeff had to sort of dig into it and flick the soil over, to be I'm launching the project, this is our first thing. Well, what ended up happening was he actually was pretty savvy, Jeff. Jeff was a funny sort of guy. He knew what would work as a good shot, and all the cameramen were lined up. Myself, the guy from SBS and ABC at 9 and 7, even a corporate guy that was there, were all lined up in a row, and all the still photographers were crouching down below on the ground below our lenses. And Jeff thought, what I'll do is I'll flick a bit of sand in front of those lenses, and that will look a really nice shot. It'll be me with the sand, and seeing a bit of a spray of sand in front. Well, what Jeff didn't realise, I really believe he didn't know this, but the sand was wet. And when you go to flick sand, if it's dry, it works beautifully. If it's wet, it doesn't. And when he went flick, it landed on this photographer that was from The Age. And Jeff and The Age were not friends at all. Jeff wouldn't talk to The Age. He hated The Age. And this photographer had now been covered with this lump of sand. And I could see what was clicking through Jeff's brain. He's thinking, this is not going to look good. I didn't mean to do it. I'm sure he didn't purposely do it. It was just one of those things that happened. And he thought, oh, crikey, this is not going to look good if this is the only photographer that's copped the sand. So he picked up another bit of sand and did it the same thing to the video guys, which landed on me and the SBS cameraman. We copped sand everywhere. Well, that afternoon, it ran hot. Everybody wanted to interview me, talk to me, and it was just... the cameraman in the department nicknamed me the Sandman for the next 6 months. You're going out in the news job, take the Sandman, and that's what happened. But it was one of those things. And every so often, that bit of video footage, comes up, and it was I remember the sand actually did get into the lens mechanism, and SBS, I believe, sent the lens off to Fujinon, which is the company that manufactured the lens, and had the service done on to get rid of the sand from inside the elements, and they sent the government the bill for it, I believe, where Channel 10 sort of said, look, send the lens away for a service, but we don't think we're going to be sending Jeff a bill for it. We'll just pay for it. So I did get the lens service very well after that. You know, that was a pretty funny time. Yeah, there's been some good times.
That's hilarious. You told Ken how you felt about the show and why you wanted to do this interview. Are you able to tell the fans as well?
Look, yeah, for sure. Look, I really loved it. I enjoyed my time. I had people like Ken who shared their experience and made me a better cameraman. The show was great to work on, and it was great to watch. And you've only got to look now when you look at how many people still want to know about Prisoner. You know, they still want to be a part of it. And, you know, we're talking 42 years later, and it's got more than just a cult following. It's got people who actually love this show. And when you're manufacturing a show, I don't think you generally are looking at what the people are watching. You don't really think so much about the fans when you're from a crew perspective at the time when we were doing the show. But looking at it back now, you know, it's those people that were the fans that watched the show that made that show a success. If we weren't having viewers watching it, the show wouldn't have continued. And, you know, like Prisoner, for all the good times, the fun times we had and everything, was a great show to work on. It was a pleasure to work on. And, you know, it helped guys like me pay my mortgage and all that jazz for several years. And the fans today are wanting to know what went on in that period. And I think it's really good to give back to people where you can. And I think that I like to think that, you know, my time in Prisoner, if I can let people know what that was like and how much I enjoyed it and what it was like to be a part of it and they get something out of it, I think that's really great. And Ken has got, like Ken is the mastermind when it comes to memories of the show. I remember snippets because I was trying at the same time to learn my craft, but I like the fact that, you know, Ken's got an incredible memory, and there was a floor manager that worked on the show, Ray Lindsay, that was with Ken at the same time, and those two people, without doubt, are the most knowledgeable in relation to the show. And I think it's great that we have the opportunity in this podcast, and, you know, for making it happen, Matt and Ken, that you are giving back to the fans what they once gave to us, and we just didn't know it. But I think it's really good, and it would be tragic not to have passed on some of those experiences.
No, we appreciate you sharing them with us and the fans. It's I mean, I've learned things today that I never knew, so it was amazing.
I hope it wasn't too boring.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
It's been a pleasure to have your company on Talking Prisoner, Barrie. Matt and I greatly appreciate it, and the memories that you've given us and the fans are just another fragment of what went into the making of Prisoner and of the crew who contributed from all of us. Thank you, Barrie.
Thank you for having me, and it's been such a pleasure to be asked to be on the show.
Thanks, Barrie.
Thank you.
Awesome. That was great.
Thanks a lot. That was great, Matt. Yeah, I hope it wasn't too boring and long-winded. Yeah, you have to cut it down, I guess, to whatever.
I'd love all those stories. I mean, I know it's about Prisoner, but hearing about, like, you know, Russell Street, which, you know, I had no idea you were there. you know, that's important to leave all that in.
Yeah, well, the shot that's got the guy, if you've ever seen any of the Russell Street footage, there's pictures of a rather robust guy going like that with his head. You see the explosion behind. That was my shot. Actually did that. He was head of the special operations group, the bloke that was the heavy guy. But, you know, like, look, I've had some great times, but, you know, like, Prisoner for me was very, very special. It really was. As I said to you before, you know, I owe Ken a heck of a lot. You know, he was really so good to me, you know, and helped me so much. And I wasn't the only one, you know. I think there was plenty more that were there, but you know, he did take the time to really, you know, make us better cameramen. And without any doubt, you know, that's what happened.
Yeah, no, it was amazing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, Sunday afternoon back.
Sorry.
Jim. Yeah, look, it's been great, Barry. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. No worries. Look after yourself. I'll give you a call. Thanks, mate. Okay. See ya. Bye.